I sipped my morning coffee, savoring the rich aroma as I stared at the blank canvas before me. The cursor blinked incessantly, mocking my inability to find inspiration. Little did I know that my life was about to be shattered into a million pieces. "Maya, we need to talk," Brandon said, his tone grave. I turned to face him, his expression sending a chill down my spine. "What's wrong?" He took a deep breath. "I found someone else. I want a divorce." The words hit me like a freight train, knocking the air from my lungs. "What do you mean you've found someone else? We just celebrated our anniversary." Brandon's gaze was unwavering. "It's not working between us, Maya. I've moved on." Tears welled in my eyes as the harsh reality set in. The man I loved, the one I thought I knew better than anyone, had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. "How could you do this to me? To us?" He shrugged, his indifference like a slap across my face. "It just happened. I'm sorry, but I have to follow my heart." I wanted to scream, to hurl insults at him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I collapsed onto the couch, sobs racking my body. The life I had so carefully built with Brandon was crumbling before my eyes. As the days passed, the pain only intensified. Brandon's coldness was like a dagger to my heart, his lack of remorse adding insult to injury. I found myself obsessively scouring our finances, searching for any clue that could explain his sudden betrayal. That's when I uncovered the truth. A trail of credit card receipts and bank statements that painted a sordid picture. Expensive gifts, lavish hotel stays, and unexplained transactions littered the pages. Brandon had been living a double life, and I was determined to uncover every sordid detail. I pored over the financial records, my hands trembling as I uncovered the extent of Brandon's deceit. Extravagant purchases, pricey hotel stays, and unexplained cash withdrawals littered the statements. It was clear he had been living a double life, and I was determined to uncover every sordid detail. As the evidence mounted, my suspicions grew stronger. Brandon's late nights at the office and sudden business trips that once seemed innocuous now took on a sinister hue. I needed answers, and I knew just the person who could help me find them. Thomas Gray, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion, agreed to take on my case. Within days, he provided me with a dossier that shattered what little remained of my trust in Brandon. "Your husband has been seeing a woman named Emily Harper," Thomas revealed, his voice grave. "He's been spending lavishly on her, fancy dinners, expensive jewelry, you name it." I felt sick to my stomach as Thomas outlined the sordid details of Brandon's affair. The scale of his betrayal was far greater than I had ever imagined. "There's more," Thomas continued. "I've uncovered evidence that suggests Brandon has been embezzling funds from his company to finance his lifestyle with Emily." A wave of nausea swept over me. Not only had Brandon cheated on me, but he had also stooped to illegal means to fund his indiscretions. The man I had once loved was a complete stranger to me. Anger coursed through my veins, a burning desire for revenge igniting within me. Brandon had destroyed our marriage and jeopardized his career. And for what? A fling with some young girl? He would pay dearly for his actions, and I knew exactly how to make him suffer. With a steely resolve, I formulated a plan. I would gather every shred of evidence, every damning detail, and present it to Brandon's boss and colleagues. His sordid affair and illegal activities would be exposed for all to see, and he would face the consequences of his actions. As I plotted my revenge, a sense of calm washed over me. For too long, Brandon had held the power, but now the tables had turned. He had underestimated me, and he would soon learn the true depths of my fury. With the evidence in hand, I knew it was time to confront Brandon about his betrayal. I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation, determined to expose the truth and make him face the consequences of his actions. When Brandon arrived home that evening, I was waiting for him in the living room, the damning financial records and private investigator's report laid out on the coffee table. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. Brandon's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene before him. "What's all this?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "It's over, Brandon. I know everything." His bravado faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with me," I spat, shoving the financial records in his face. "The credit card statements, the hotel receipts, I've seen it all. You've been having an affair with some woman named Emily Harper." Brandon's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, his gaze defiant. "And that's not even the worst of it," I continued, brandishing the private investigator's report. "You've been embezzling funds from your company to finance your little fling. How could you do this, Brandon? How could you throw away everything we had for a cheap thrill?" His eyes hardened, and he let out a derisive laugh. "You think you know everything, but you don't have a clue." I recoiled at the venom in his voice, a wave of disgust washing over me. "I was miserable with you, Maya," he sneered. "You were always so caught up in your work, never giving me the attention I deserved. Emily made me feel alive again." His words stung like a slap to the face, but I refused to let him see how deeply they cut. "And as for the money," he continued, "I deserved it. All those long hours, all the sacrifices I made for that company, they owed me." I shook my head in disbelief, my heart shattering at the depths of his selfishness and greed. "You're a monster, Brandon. A pathetic, delusional monster." His lips curled into a cruel smile. "Maybe, but at least I had the guts to go after what I wanted. You were always too weak, too afraid to take risks." In that moment, any lingering affection I had for Brandon disappeared, replaced by a cold, burning hatred. He had destroyed our marriage and everything we had built together, all for his own selfish desires. And for that, he would pay dearly. As Brandon turned and walked away, I vowed to make him suffer the consequences of his actions. He thought he had won, but he had no idea what was in store for him. The game was just beginning, and I intended to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. After the explosive confrontation with Brandon, I found myself consumed by a burning desire for revenge. His callous betrayal and utter lack of remorse had left me reeling, but I refused to let him get away with his despicable actions. With the help of Thomas Gray, the private investigator, I delved deeper into Brandon's sordid affairs. The evidence we uncovered was damning, a paper trail of financial misdeeds that painted a picture of a man consumed by greed and selfishness. "He's been funneling funds from his company to support his lavish lifestyle with Emily," Thomas revealed, his expression grim. "It's not just a few thousand here and there. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." I felt sick to my stomach as the full extent of Brandon's crimes came into focus. He had not only betrayed me on a personal level, but had also betrayed the trust of his employer and colleagues. "There's more," Thomas added, sliding a folder across the table. "I've uncovered evidence that suggests Brandon has been involved in other illegal activities at his workplace, kickbacks, insider trading, you name it." As I pored over the documents, a sense of determination washed over me. Brandon had dug his own grave, and I intended to bury him in it. With the incriminating evidence in hand, I set my plan in motion. I scheduled a meeting with Brandon's boss, Mr. Davis, and the company's HR manager, Jessica Lang. It was time to bring Brandon's house of cards crashing down around him. The look on Brandon's face when he walked into the conference room was priceless. His cocky demeanor quickly faded as he realized the trap I had set. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his eyes darting between Mr. Davis and Jessica. I stepped forward, clutching the folder containing the damning evidence. "It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions, Brandon." With a steely resolve, I laid out the details of his misdeeds, the embezzlement, the illicit affairs, the flagrant abuse of his position. Brandon's face grew paler with each revelation, his once confident facade crumbling before our eyes. "Is this true?" Mr. Davis demanded, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. Brandon opened his mouth to protest, but the words died on his lips. He knew there was no denying the mountain of evidence against him. "You're finished, Brandon," I declared, savoring the taste of victory. "Your career, your reputation, it's all over." As Brandon was escorted from the building, his head hung in shame, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had brought this upon himself, and now he would face the consequences of his actions. The first phase of my revenge was complete, but I wasn't finished yet. Emily Harper, the woman who had so willingly participated in Brandon's betrayal, would soon learn that her part in this sordid affair was far from over. The look on Brandon's face as he was escorted from the building was priceless, a mixture of shame, disbelief, and utter humiliation. But my revenge was far from over. Emily Harper, the woman who had so willingly participated in his betrayal, would soon learn that her role in this sordid affair was far from over. I had planned every detail meticulously, ensuring that Brandon's downfall would be as public and devastating as possible. With the help of Thomas Gray, the private investigator, I had gathered enough evidence to bury them both. The next phase of my plan involved a grand spectacle, a confrontation that would leave no doubt in anyone's mind about the depths of Brandon and Emily's deception. I arranged for Emily to meet me at an upscale restaurant under the pretense of discussing a potential job opportunity. Unsuspecting, she arrived right on time, her bright smile quickly fading when she saw the icy expression on my face. "Maya? What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I gestured for her to sit, my lips curling into a cold smile. "I think it's time we had a little chat, Emily." Her brow furrowed in confusion, but she took the seat across from me, her eyes wary. "I know everything," I stated, my voice low and even. "I know about your affair with Brandon, and I know about the money he's been funneling to you." Emily's eyes widened, panic spreading across her features. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her hands trembling. "Don't bother lying," I snapped, sliding a file across the table. "I have all the evidence right here, bank statements, hotel receipts, the works." Emily's face drained of color as she flipped through the damning documents. "Brandon's been embezzling funds from his company to support your little fling," I continued, relishing the sight of her discomfort. "And you little homewrecker, were more than happy to take advantage of it." Emily opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a wave of my hand. "Save it," I hissed. "You had your chance to come clean, but you chose to stick by Brandon's side, even after you knew the truth." Emily's eyes darted around the restaurant, her panic mounting as she realized the scene I had orchestrated. Waiters, patrons, and even Brandon's former colleagues were all watching, their faces a mix of shock and disgust. "So now, you get to face the consequences of your actions," I declared, my voice ringing out across the room. "Just like Brandon, you're going to lose everything, your reputation, your freedom, everything." Emily's shoulders slumped, defeated. She knew there was no escape, no way to talk her way out of this. "I hope it was worth it," I spat, leaning closer, "because this is just the beginning of your punishment." As I turned and walked away, I couldn't help but savor the sweet taste of victory. Brandon and Emily had thought they could betray me and get away with it, but they had underestimated my resolve. Their lives were in ruins, and they had no one to blame but themselves. The weight of revenge had been lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of newfound freedom. I was finally free to move on, to rebuild my life without the burden of their betrayal weighing me down. And as for Brandon and Emily, well, they had made their bed, and now they would have to lie in it, together, if they were lucky. With Brandon and Emily's sordid affair now exposed, it was time to take the final steps in my revenge plan. I had orchestrated their public humiliation, but they still needed to face the legal consequences of their actions. I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Davis, Brandon's former boss, and Jessica Lang, the HR manager. As I walked into the conference room, the tension was palpable. Brandon and Emily were already seated, their faces etched with dread. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice calm and steady. "I know the past few weeks have been tumultuous, to say the least." Brandon shot me a venomous glare, but I ignored him, focusing my attention on Mr. Davis and Jessica. "As you're both aware, I've uncovered substantial evidence of Brandon's illegal activities, embezzlement, fraud, you name it," I stated, sliding the thick file across the table. "He's been siphoning funds from the company to finance his lavish lifestyle with Emily." Mr. Davis's face grew red with anger as he flipped through the documents, his jaw clenched tightly. "This is absolutely unacceptable," he growled, slamming the file shut. "Brandon, you're fired, effective immediately, and we'll be pursuing legal action against you to the fullest extent of the law." Brandon opened his mouth to protest, but Mr. Davis silenced him with a stern glare. "Don't bother trying to deny it," he snapped. "The evidence is overwhelming. You've disgraced this company and betrayed our trust in the worst possible way." Emily squirmed in her seat, her eyes darting nervously between Brandon and me. "And you," Mr. Davis continued, turning his attention to her, "you're just as complicit in this mess. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences for your actions?" Emily's bottom lip trembled, but she remained silent. Her head hung in shame. Maya has given us the option to handle this internally, Jessica chimed in. But if you don't cooperate fully, we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities. Emily's eyes widened in fear, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. She had thought she could ride Brandon's coattails to a life of luxury, but now she was facing the harsh reality of her choices. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. "The truth, every sordid detail of your affair with Brandon and your involvement in his illegal activities." Emily swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly. "If you cooperate fully," I continued, "we might be able to mitigate the legal consequences. But if you lie or hold anything back, you'll face the full wrath of the law." A heavy silence hung in the air as Emily considered her options. She knew she had no choice but to comply. The weight of the evidence against her was too great. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll tell you everything." As Emily began to recount the sordid tale of her affair with Brandon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. They had thought they could betray me and get away with it, but, in the end, karma had caught up with them. Their lives were in ruins, and they had no one to blame but themselves. As for me, I was finally free from the burden of their betrayal, and free to move forward with a newfound sense of strength and resilience. With Brandon's world crumbling around him, I knew it was time to deal the final blow to the woman who had so willingly participated in his betrayal, Emily Harper. I arranged to meet her at a secluded cafe, away from prying eyes. When she arrived, her face was pale and drawn, the weight of her misdeeds clearly weighing heavily upon her. "Maya," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't know what else to say except I'm sorry. I never meant for things to spiral so out of control." I regarded her coolly, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Do you really expect me to believe that? You knew exactly what you were doing from the start." Emily flinched at the venom in my voice, her eyes downcast. "You're right," she whispered. "I knew Brandon was married and I didn't care. I was selfish and stupid, and now I'm paying the price." "You have no idea the depth of the price you'll pay," I hissed, leaning forward. "Brandon's life is in ruins, thanks to your little fling, his career, his reputation, all of it gone. And you're next." Emily's eyes widened with fear, her hands trembling. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I know everything," I stated, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Every sordid detail of your involvement in Brandon's illegal activities. The money laundering, the fraud, it's all there, in black and white." Emily's face drained of color as she flipped through the damning evidence, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "No, this can't be happening," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh, but it is," I replied, my voice laced with satisfaction. "You thought you could play the innocent victim, but you're just as guilty as Brandon, maybe even more so." Emily's shoulders slumped, defeated. She knew there was no way out, no escape from the consequences of her actions. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling. I regarded her coolly, my mind already made up. "The truth. Every last detail of your involvement in Brandon's illegal activities. If you cooperate fully and tell me everything, I might be able to help you avoid the worst of the legal consequences." Emily's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope flickering across her face. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll tell you everything." For the next hour, Emily spilled her guts, recounting the sordid tale of her affair with Brandon and her complicity in his illegal activities. As the details poured out, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when Emily would finally face the consequences of her actions. When she finished, her voice hoarse and her eyes brimming with tears, I regarded her with a cold, steely gaze. "Thank you for your cooperation," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "But make no mistake. You've brought this upon yourself. You made your bed, and now you have to lie in it." As I turned and walked away, leaving Emily to face the fallout of her decisions, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The weight of revenge had been lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a newfound sense of freedom and strength. I was finally free to move on with my life, to leave the pain and betrayal of the past behind me. And as for Brandon and Emily, well, they would have to learn to live with the consequences of their actions. just as I had learned to live with the consequences of mine. In the aftermath of my confrontation with Emily, a sense of calm washed over me. For months, I had been consumed by anger, bitterness, and a burning desire for revenge. But now, with Brandon and Emily's lives in ruins, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. It hadn't been easy, of course. The initial shock of Brandon's betrayal had hit me like a ton of bricks, leaving me reeling and questioning everything I thought I knew about our marriage. The nights spent poring over financial records and piecing together the sordid details of his affair with Emily had taken their toll, both emotionally and mentally. But through it all, I had remained resolute, driven by a steely determination to expose the truth and make them pay for their misdeeds. And in the end, I had emerged victorious, my revenge served cold and calculated. Brandon's world had crumbled around him, his career and reputation in tatters. The once powerful executive was now a shell of his former self, facing legal action and financial ruin. And Emily, the woman who had so willingly participated in his betrayal, had been left abandoned and facing her own set of legal consequences. As for me, I was finally free. Free from the burden of their lies, free from the weight of their betrayal. It was time to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. In the months that followed, I threw myself into my work, channeling my newfound energy and focus into my freelance graphic design business. Projects that had once felt like a chore now filled me with a sense of purpose and accomplishment. I also rediscovered old hobbies and interests that had fallen by the wayside during my marriage. I took up painting, losing myself in the vibrant colors and the therapeutic act of creating something beautiful from a blank canvas. Slowly but surely, I began to heal, the scars of Brandon's betrayal fading into the background. Of course, there were still moments when the pain would resurface, when the memories of our life together would come flooding back. But with each passing day, those moments became fewer and farther between. As I stood on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the vast expanse of the ocean, I couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder and possibility. The world was my oyster, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. "This is just the beginning," I whispered to myself, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "I'm ready for the next chapter of my life." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving the past behind me and stepping boldly into the future, a future that was mine, and mine alone, to shape and mold as I saw fit. For too long I had been defined by Brandon's actions and the pain of his betrayal. But now I was free to forge my own path, to write my own story. And this time, there would be no room for deception or heartbreak, only growth, self-discovery, and the unbridled joy of living life on my own terms. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the lessons I had learned, the strength I had found within myself. The road ahead might be uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive, ready to embrace whatever challenges and adventures lay ahead.